Hey, this discussion is about botanical names or scientific names and also common names. Most of us know trees, shrubs, that forth by common names. Azalea is an azalea. That's another good example. Willow trees, oak trees, maple trees. Those are all common names. But there's also what's called a scientific or botanical names, and they're those names that are hard to pronounce. For instance, fringe tree. Fringe tree is the common name. It's also known as Grancy Graybeard, also known as Old Man's Beard. Those are all three common names. But the scientific name is Cheonanthus virginicus. Cheonanthus virginicus. Grancy Graybeard, Old Man's Beard, it's a lot easier to say, as is fringe tree. However, there are regional differences in trees. If I go up to, say, Ohio and I say, hey, how about an Old Man's Beard tree, they may not know what I'm talking about. But if I walk into a nursery and I say, hey, do you have any Cheonanthus virginicus, they still may not know what I'm talking about, but there's a good chance they do. In other words, Cheonanthus virginicus is the same thing in Georgia as it is in Soviet Georgia, or I should say, what is it now, the Republic of Georgia? So, scientific names give plants an exact name that is known across the world. And that's one of the reasons they use Latin. Latin is a dead language. So, it doesn't really change, that the names will stay the same. Another instance, black tupelo, Nyssa sylvatica. Common name, black gum, sour gum, pepperidge. I've always heard it called the black gum. I've never heard it called a pepperidge, never heard it called a sour gum, but just a black gum. Black tupelo, Nyssa sylvatica. Again, the scientific name, there's just one of them, known across the United States. If I were to go to California and say, hey, where's your black gum trees? They may look at me kind of crazy. If I said, hey, do you have any Nyssa sylvatica? They'll still look at me kind of crazy and say, hey, we don't have those trees here. Okay, now the binomial system of nomenclature was developed by Carlos Linnaeus, an early botanist, and he formed a system. It's called binomial because it's two parts. He formed this genus-species system, for instance, dogwood or Cornus florida. Cornus is the genus. Florida is the species, and the whole thing together is known as the specific epithet. Now, notice that the cornus here, the C is capitalized, and that's the genus. The genus is always capitalized. The species, Florida, the F is not capitalized. All right, next slide here. Okay, then there is variety. Variety is a subgroup of a species that occurs in nature and can be reproduced from seed. In other words, there is a dogwood out there, a red dogwood, called the Cornus florida variety rubra. When you see rubra, that usually means it's a red variety. Then there's something else called a cultivar. Cultivar, or cultivated variety, is a group of plants that retain their distinguishing features when reproduced by vegetative propagation. Now, notice that's a little different from the variety up here that was reproduced from seed. When you reproduce things by seed, you have a lot of variation in them. When you use vegetative propagation, not so much. In this instance, there is Calycanthus floridus, and then the cultivar is shown in single quotes, Athens. Calycanthus is sweet shrub. Now here's a regular flower, Pentas flower, Pentas lanceolata nova. Again, the cultivar is nova. It's in single quotes. And once again, genus is capitalized, species is not. Okay, again, you got variety plants, and varieties are different plants that occur as they're reproduced from seed. And then there are cultivars, vegetative propagation. Okay, some species names are derived from the country of origins. Let me back up a little bit. All right, go back up to here. Notice this Calycanthus floridus. That floridus is a species. Floridus, blah, 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 blah. Okay, here's a good example. Cheonanthus virginicus. Again, Cheonanthus is the genus. Virginicus is the species, and it comes from Virginia. And back when these plants were named, Virginia wasn't just the state of Virginia. Virginia sometimes, especially for the English, was an overall term for all of the eastern seaboard. It wasn't like, hey, we found this plant in the state of Virginia. It was like we might have found this plant in South Carolina, but we called this whole area Virginia. So that's where that name came from, Virginicus. So that species can refer to where the plant came from. It can refer to the color of the plant. It can refer to maybe the shape of the plant, the size of it. Let's go back down here. There we go. Okay. Again, names are derived. Some species names are derived from countries of origin. Japonica, Japan. Chinensis, China. Americana, that would be America, right around here. Mexicana, Mexica. I meant Mexico. Other botanical names can be descriptive. Pygmacea, small. Nana is small. Rubra is red. Gigantea, what does that mean? Oh, giant, yeah. All right. Other descriptions of names that might show up. Elatus, winged. There is Euonymus elatus, burning bush. And if you look at the stems real closely, you will see some like little structures that look like wings on the stems. Alba is white. Elatus could be tall. Marginata, striped margins. Pubescence, downy. All right. See what else we got here. Is that the last slide in this little series? Okay, yeah, that's the last slide in this little series. So you can see that there's really a lot of information in a botanical name, some descriptors, and there are some lists out there that go a lot further than this little presentation. Remember, when using Latin names, the genus is capitalized, the species not capitalized. Also, typically, if you're printing it or using a computer, italicize the botanical name too. That's another good thing. There's a bunch of other little rules, but that's just something to get us started. Hey, thank you.